Welcome back to another episode of Together is Better. I'm Jeff Clark with Nitor, and today I'm honored and privileged to have my friend, the Global Chief Revenue Officer of SAP's Finance and Spend, Mr. Peter Graulich. Peter, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Jeff, for having me. And this is a great setup. I'm so happy to do this with you here at Sapphire in Orlando.
Thank you. Yeah, day one of Sapphire, Partner Summit today. A lot of energy, super crowded.
Yeah.
I think, this Sapphire in particular is going to be probably the most innovative, foundational type Sapphire that I've been to in 10 years. What's exciting for you about Sapphire this year?
I mean, I said it earlier to my team this morning, right? When we pulled them all together to get some excitement into them, I said, I heard that there are 13,000 people here at Sapphire. So if you can count all the people that, work behind the scenes and then the people that come. And I said, like, everyone, the customers and the partners, they're paying money, ridiculous amounts of money actually for hotel stays and paying money to be here. So, this is a phenomenal privilege of ours to have the ability to pull so many people together that actually work on the same goal to solve the customer's challenges and help them, excel. And then on top of that, you said it. I mean, it's a defining moment. I think it's also fun to see that SAP, which is a long and old company, right, has a lot of legacy, that we now all rally around that point to show the world that you still need, the legacy software providers and that we can also innovate. And so it was fun to see over the, in rallying up towards Sapphire that everybody was actually in this startup mentality again to make it happen.
I think it's bringing energy.
Yeah.
Right. If you kind of look back and to everybody's careers where, SaaS really hit the scene very hard, things got a little stagnant in my mind, right? Yep. And then once you saw really kind of the fast pace and development of AI, and now you're seeing all of the big companies like SAP just rally completely around it. I think it's re-energized customers, SAP, or like the employees are fired up about what's going on, and certainly partners like us as well, right? Because it's opportunity, right? And it's fast change.
And I think sometimes it's this, like, you can always do something intrinsically or externally motivated. But I think here, this is for the first time feels also because it's such a defining moment that you can see now it becomes really an intrinsic motivation of each and every one to work and want to get there. So that's a different kind of energy that you can feel. And you said it well, right? I think it's also an opportunity that I said to my team this morning, I feel like I'm in a big playhouse where you can finally take all of the best things that you have, the data and the processes, and then make it work in a seamless fashion that we've always, I think, envisioned, but haven't had the tools and the capabilities and the rigor around it to do it.
Yeah, there was a lot of hope that these things would all work, right? Where you've got the unstructured data world and the structured data world, and you've got all these different applications that are all in this ecosystem all around it. And then what is available now when you get it right. Let's talk a little bit about that because, Next Gen Ariba is a great example of that. For customers that want to really consume that innovation in the way that they need to drive new processes, drive better efficiencies. What was the thesis behind Next Gen? And then what do you recommend in terms of, as a customer views that, how should they be thinking about Next Gen?
Yeah, I think first when we decided to go to Next Gen and rebuild basically Ariba on a strong foundation based on VTP so that it really speaks better and works better with the other SAP products and certainly also the non-SAP products, that was 3 years ago, so way before even all the advancements, let's say with AI and also the coding actually came out. But the idea was, the Ariba platform is 20 years old. So, the technology is not as open to, expose APIs, work together with other platforms. And then also the speed for us to bring out new features was always slowed down because of the fact that our platform wasn't that, intelligent and innovative anymore. So key for us was expose as many APIs as possible so that customers have the chance to extend where needed. But also at the same time, I think the whole concept of Next Gen was bring it back to what is actually needed. Because I think over the last 20
That's a great point. I like how you said that. What's actually needed?
Yeah, because over the last 20 years, I mean, many of our customers have bastardized Ariba to an extent. And again, right, I'm not blaming them, but maybe 10 years ago, it was actually true that the process that they have built in a non-standard fashion, in a config, was actually differentiating them.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, how much differentiation do you get from indirect material procurement, right? So the question needs to also now be, okay, if you are really doing indirect procurement, can you maybe rely on a standard? Then you have also the ability to do that much faster, do the rollout much faster, upgrade much faster, and then actually consume also standard models. And then really decide, okay, which part of procurement really do you want to differentiate that gives you a competitive advantage, and then put your time there, and then the platform allows the extensibility to then do that in a fashion that also you can make it work to upgrade and whatnot, and work with partners that have the expertise.
Yeah, it's everything that's been dated code-wise, right? Whether it's Ariba, it's Coupa, it's all the others. I think the advantage for SAP obviously is the depth and breadth that you can bring from a design and architecture standpoint. And somebody that worked at Ariba for as long as I did, even then the code was pseudo dated, right? We're talking 2008, 2012, right after the acquisition. So this is an exciting time, I think, for the customers. And the perception that we're hearing from our customers, all those, there's excitement about next gen, right? The questions for them is really about timing, right? What do you when you're talking to a customer and they're saying, hey, how should we look at this from a phasing standpoint? Are there any examples or anything you would share about when is a customer really ready? And where should they start?
So this is actually a really good point, because in the beginning we thought, okay, we go after the least complex customers, the ones maybe with one module or with the most standardized implementation, and then try to upgrade. And what turned out to be the case is actually they don't have the support from IT and other organizational parts of the organization to actually give them and provide them the support to do that effort. So that was not super successful, right? We are still continuing to work with them. But then what turned out is actually that there were a bunch of super complex customers that we actually directly excluded from the start and said, like, they would never go there because they're too complex. And they're actually now saying, you know what? I actually use this as the opportunity to do greenfield. And then we roll it out to lesser complex countries, lesser complex parts of the organization. We learn through this. And then we basically make sure that every time we roll out to another country or organization, we will challenge them like we've never done before, whether we really need this requirement that they are coming up with. And then also, how do you solve for this requirement? Because I think in the past, right, they've always screamed for features, whereas today you always need to ask the question and say, couldn't you automate that? Couldn't you get that data from another part of the puzzle? So what I'm seeing is that customers are very open. What is needed for them to be ready is actually they need to make sure that they have the internal support. Because currently, take for example pharma. What we hear is, even from the chief procurement officers in pharmaceuticals, is that all the IT resources are currently going to the production, actually, to the invention of new patents, and not to IT. So they're like, we are on the back burner right now. Even if we would want to, we don't get the resources. So either and many do that, either we build our own resources. So we basically use our available headcount, and with attrition, we then hire a shadow IT function or shadow AI function into our organization. But in general, I would say there's a lot of excitement, and customers, what I see more and more is that they say, let's not go to an upgrade. We have implemented Ariba over the last 15 years, and I think it's a good point for us to start all over.
Yeah, I think so too. And we hear the same thing, which is, what they want from us is guidance. Right? Okay, is this the right time? How should we do this? It's like anything. It's do it in a environment where you can get stability from it. You can iterate and learn. You can drive the optimization you want, right? And then start expanding it. I found it very interesting that the perception was the large complex customers would not be the ones that want to jump into it. But what I'm hearing, even from our own customer base, is those that are the larger organizations actually have a bigger appetite for this because they understand the impact. The impact's so much more significant for them. And they see the next 2, 3, 5 years, where if they don't go down that journey and they don't have an agentic strategy that's working in collaboration with that, how far that organization is going to fall behind.
Yeah, and I think also they received already pretty aggressive targets from their management
100%.
In terms of, okay, just that we are clear, your procurement headcount is not going to grow over the next years, right? It's only going to a different direction. And now you need to work it out. So, and then what we hear at the same time is they say, some of them painfully realize that they have focused on the wrong suppliers over the last years, right? They left out, for example, the NVIDIAs, the Broadcoms, the Qualcomms, the whatever SanDisks. And now they are trying to grab their attention again. But these suppliers are now also very self-confident and are saying, nope, we have been treated like, an afterthought in the past. We are not supplying to you for now, right? Because we have not enough supply for everybody. And so I think there's also a desire, one, to say, okay, we need to fulfill these super aggressive targets. But then two, we also need to free up people so that they can focus on really those 20% that make a difference. And always find this pipeline of, signals that signal you that there is a new supplier up and coming. And then what that means is also you need to automate the 80%. And you can only do that through automation, process optimization, AI, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same concepts, but you need to find ways how you define it on how things happen behind the scenes. And you are only observing and making sure that everything runs the right way.
I think to the point you just made about that longer tail of the suppliers, I think even the way buyers are looking at that relationship now, to your point, you're going to have a future where you've got an agent doing most of that purchasing and then another agent in the supplier side, right? Negotiating, figuring out all the other details that they need to actually get the transaction done. So that automation layer, to your point, is going to continue to go farther and farther up to where you have a smaller percentage, but the higher value or strategic suppliers. And that relationship is going to change as well. Because things are getting constrained too, especially as you're looking at the SanDisks, those that provide GPUs and things like that. That paradigm shifts completely for customers as they move forward. The network is going to also get an evolution in itself. Do you want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, before I go there, just one comment that I wanted to make is oftentimes people associate a purely digital engagement with something negative, right? So, oh, you are now grading me down to a pure digital engagement. But I think if you've realized it yourself in your personal life, sometimes the digital engagement is the often better one, right? Because if you want something, you don't want to wait until the insurance agent calls you and gives you this long about, this, that, the other. You just want homeowners insurance now. So in that case, and I went through this, a digital engagement, I would always prefer it, right? Or also in customer QBRs, quarterly business reviews, where we go with them through their data and look at it. Actually, many of the customers say, can I also get this digital version of it? Because then I can actually look at it when I have time for it and when I'm in the right mood and mindset to look at this, right? And really then take it from there, and not when I had to squeeze in half an hour with you guys personally in person. So I think we should also not confuse. A purely digital engagement can be as good or sometimes even better than a personal engagement, right? It depends on the state of the relationship.
It's without a doubt, it's A1 more efficient, right? To your point, I think, our customer base wants to consume information at their terms, not when we want to sit down, right? And it's all how it's served up to them. I love the whole digital component of that. And you can look at it even in our industry, right? Self-deployable, self-configurable software, right? Allowing that customer to do things at scale and at a rate that's way faster than they've ever experienced before. So even the deployment of that software changes dramatically, so that it accelerates the ROI for the customer too, which is pretty cool. Really good point too about on the last point on the readiness before we jump to the network, which is adoption and the consumption of what they've already got is so important. We had Natalie Kern on earlier, where that's kind of her charter within the customer or the partner ecosystem. And we hear the same thing from the customer, which is, hey, like we've got these pockets potentially where, we're not as well adopted as we should. What kind of corrective action can we take now in advance, right, of moving into next gen? So there's a big push with us, with our customer base. What do customers tell you about adoption and the importance of that before they move to next gen? Is there any correlation?
Oh yeah, for sure. So what we see is that, and that's I think why everybody's so excited that the agents that we will announce work for both current gen as well as for next gen.
That, by the way,
because now that gives us the opportunity to use what the customers have built, because actually the end-to-end data in Ariba is great. The process flow is great. It's just the user experience that hasn't always been great. And also the ability to expose APIs, and then, that becomes MCP servers in the future and agent skills and whatnot. But I mean, at the end of the day, what it allows us now is to go to existing clients, make use of their investment that they've done over the last years, build some cases where we can show this full level of automation, at some point autonomous cross-domain reasoning, right? Where you use some finance data, put it together with the PO data, make a good decision on whether this PO fits into your budget or not, and how you can optimize it. And then use that outcome as a justification to go to next gen. Because I think it's much easier if you've seen the outcomes to then explain, okay, but now we have come to a certain limit from the ability, for example, to use the products in correlation with each other. Now it's the time for us to go to next gen. And then it's much easier for a manager also that needs to make a decision to then approve this investment.
Yeah, for sure. And look, the right entry points. Okay, you've got Joule, right? If you're an ECC S4 customer as well, and then you've got classic Ariba, for example, we're going to give you the tools to actually leverage this. But, if you really want to take that to the next level, when you're ready to do that leap, right, to go transition the rest of the stack over to next gen, then it's going to make it easier as well. But they're getting value today. I think it was a really smart move. My concern initially was, that it's only going to be available for the next gen customers. So I was like, wait a minute, you're going to get screaming customers left and right. And instead, I think the appetite is really strong to say, okay, let's go trial some of this and see how it goes.
And I think also we need to be realistic, right? I mean, there will be a time where we have next gen and current gen, in parallel, and even within customers, they will have moved maybe parts of their organization already, and they will have not moved on other parts, but still those systems need to talk to each other. Those systems need to make sure that the supplier, and then there's a perfect segue to the network, is onboarded only once, right? And not 3 times, and then you also find out that you work with the exact same supplier, and you can maybe lift some efficiencies. So I think we need to be realistic in all of this, and we need to also work with the customers where they are, right? And then meet them there. And so I'm actually super excited about it and the opportunity to now work with both sides, have them make the right decisions. And again, I think we spoke about this earlier before we actually started the recording, is that I also think it's super important that they do the right change management on their side to also explain that not everything will move at the same time, right? Because oftentimes people say, we do this massive procurement transformation project. And then with that comes the expectation that every aspect of procurement is going to be better in 6 months. But you most probably are better off telling them, okay, we are starting with sourcing because we found the biggest opportunity there, or we're starting with automating invoices or whatever it is. But be very explicit about it, what it is that people can expect.
Yeah, and it goes back to the same thing. Like, nobody wants to eat the entire elephant in one bite anymore, right? It's not plausible. It's too big of an endeavor, if you want to call it that. So they're not getting those things approved. And on the change management side, which is something we do exceptionally well, cornerstone of our business, it is the absolute critical mass, right? And again, if you think about the world that we're embarking on, okay, how does an employee, a procurement sourcing analyst, or this person within the organization do a co-work? Like, where's the human in the loop element of that? Like, how do you begin to train people to leverage the power of what those tools provide, right? And look, you can do it pretty simplistically. My kids are using Claude Builder, right, to build websites and do all this other neat stuff, but you got to formalize that. And I think the approach of doing it iteratively, right, really makes sense for customers, because they can say yes easier, and they can stabilize and then move to the next and move to the next. Yes, it requires a little bit more of an extension of that journey, but I think, the realist in those organizations say, but that's the best way for us to do it, because we can focus on specific groups, train them along the way. It's just like building the house, like we were talking about earlier. Like, if you don't lay a right foundation, this wall is going to collapse in 6 months. Right. So.
And the other thing is also, I mean, we are currently, I would say, most of the customers that I work with are in the experimentation phase still. Right? So they're trying out things, and like we do in our private lives, try to optimize a little bit of the reconciliation of our bank accounts, how we sort photos and whatnot. But I think also there's one very important thing that we need to make sure, and this is true for us as SAP, as a software provider, as well as for customers. It feels like now you can build everything, But you need to be also very mindful, is this really something that I should build, right, as a customer? Is this something that differentiates me so that I need to own this piece of code? Even though it's Claude-produced code, still somebody needs to maintain this, right? And it is also a form of distraction for your team, because they will not do something else then, right? Same is true for us. We now, more than ever, need to be very, very clear and upfront with, is this a space that we want to own? Yes or no? Because technically, yes, you can build it, but somebody needs to then also get adoption, maintain it. So I think it's also important now that as we get out of this experimentation phase, that we also are very clear with our teams saying, this is something that we want to do. This is not something that we want to do.
Right.
Because this distraction oftentimes is the worst for companies and teams that everybody goes off to do their own thing.
The one thing that I admire about the way European companies and countries are viewing AI is the safety aspect of that, the controls aspect. Where, look, in the West, it's it's the Wild West, right? Like, what's more American than cowboy, and what we're doing here. But that's also a danger. And I think for an organization to know that SAP has put in place the right guardrails, right, and controls. Because look, if you use any of these LLM and foundation models, right, you can put something in there and ask one question to one and then repeat the same question across Grok or Claude or whatever and get 4 different answers.
Yeah.
And so how do you create to where you're not having, these responses by the agents that are going to order 1 million parts when you only need one and at $1 million? So I think that's the right rational approach, right, which is to do that, with some precision and control and some real thoughtfulness behind it.
Yeah, the hallucination is really a topic. And
100%.
I mean, we have now the ability to ground also the agent always in some experience from the process knowledge that we have, right? And then make sure that the hallucination is somewhat guardrailed. But also, I think the permission concepts, that was something that I just learned from our product teams, that, with SAP's AI platform, you basically inherit the permission concepts from Ariba, which is great then, because you don't need to build it once again.
Right.
Everybody who was able to see all invoices before is now able to see all invoices, and everybody who wasn't allowed to look at it can't look at it in the future, right? Because that's also something you don't want to expose every data aspect to everybody. And so that's really key.
Yeah, and I like what you said too about, just because you can build it, should you build it? Like the vibe coding thing, and it's kind of goes back to this whole SaaS apocalypse and all this other craziness. I think it's completely overblown. Is the industry going to change? Absolutely. Yeah. Right. It's already underway in how it's going to do that. But, again, taking the processes and where you've got really, world-class architecture and everything already thought up and millions of dollars invested in that, you want to iterate on it and you want to continue to work with it. You don't want to replace it and let, somebody in, some role just kind of create vibe coding this process. How efficient is that going to be? It's not.
And I mean, you mentioned something earlier that is so important. So I've seen so many customers fail with, our products, but also with competitors' products, right? I mean, we've seen it. It's not a secret that happens. But why does it happen? It doesn't happen because, the product wasn't able to do it, right? You can achieve almost every outcome with all of them. It's the change management aspect. It's the tech savviness of some of the people. So also, I would ask the question, right? I think you can build it, but then also don't underestimate what it takes to implement and adopt a tool.
Correct.
Right? And I think most of the procurement people have gone through painful implementations and rollouts. So I think also I would ask the question, is it worth the distraction in your organization to do that, right? Or do you want, like you said, iterate on top of it and then bring somebody in like Nitor, who is really good at change management and has this expertise because you've worked on both sides. You've worked on the customer side, you've worked on the Ariba side, so on the producer side. So it's great.
Yeah, I read an article on the finance side of that. I want to get to the network too, so we'll get to that. But again, if you're in something that's regulated, that requires audit, right? Are you really going to allow, as a CFO, somebody to vibe code when you've got world-class solutions like Blackline and you've got embedded solutions in SAP and their core finance offerings? Like, no, you're not, right? And those are way too mission critical for any type of lax controls in that process. And that's an exciting part for you guys as well. And that's in your portfolio too.
That's a super exciting part, and especially because it's also stuff where the result is not clearly defined. So if you think about a text statement, right, it's not something that you can actually test in the sense that you could test an outcome, if a sourcing event has now been, completed. A text statement is different in every customer. So you need to make sure that you code it in the right way, that you keep the guardrails in place so that in that process, every step is visible that has been taken and auditable, and then you make sure that you arrive at the right outcome, right? And so I think that is the part where really the intelligence comes in. How do you ground this agent continuously in reality? How do you make sure that it's guardrailed all along the process? Because, and a text statement, if you look at the company or whatever, it could be everything from $50 that you own to like 500 million that you owe because to the financial department. Who knows, right? You have a feel for it, but again, I think that's why that is the biggest and the highest level of accuracy that is required there.
Yeah. So the network, right? The cornerstone of SAP from a business connectivity standpoint between what we do on the Ariba side, logistics, transportation, the broadness of it. How do you see that in the future? It continues to evolve in an agentic world. What's the impact?
The network has always been, let's say, the cornerstone, you said it, that we have centered ourselves around. And I think it is so deeply connected to procurement. It has always been in supply chain. And so I think there we can just take out the friction that we had, right? If you think about supplier onboarding, how painful that is, especially for somebody who has not worked necessarily with big companies and whatnot to get on there, and then also to see the value of it, right? You need to jump through all these hoops, but there we have, of course, a huge ability to make that one a better user experience too, or largely automated. But then also, there's so many things, right? If you own a company or you work as the CEO of the company, right? If you ever changed your bank details of your company, right? There's no more painful process to then let every supplier know and all the fraud that is going on in that space, right? Yeah. If you can do that through the network, how cool is that, right? So there are so many things that you could think of that you can add on top now, and also where maybe the human element in the past would have maybe shied away from doing all the hard work, and now you can just automate.
Yeah, to me, it's about speed to value, right? So transitioning that, modernizing it, because it hadn't been all modernized in a while, right? Yeah. And that goes back to kind of that legacy architecture component of it. And the points of friction slowed down in some cases, and you've got others that blew through it really quickly, depends on mandate. But you would have some of that. And I think now that the opportunity is there to really take that and say, okay, that's not going to be a friction point. That is an enabler now to value, and something that we can actually automate almost end to end now. And then to your point, the bank account part was the part we always used to hear from customers, like we changed X, Y, and Z, and this was a painful experience for us with that.
And I think also concepts like sovereignty, right? Sovereign data centers, right? Has really challenged Ariba, because there you then need to say, okay, let's say we have a European network.
Yes.
How do you make sure that you don't need to onboard twice, right?
Yes.
So currently we have a European network and you need to onboard twice, but in the future, of course, the new architecture will also allow them to point back to the supplier, even though you are still governing the data in the right data center. So there are just so many concepts that have challenged the network over the years, where the architecture was just not allowing certain things, and this is now the perfect segue. And then also for all the customers that are watching it, of course, next-gen Ariba next-gen network is the prerequisite for next-gen Ariba. So that's also important, right? Because you otherwise can't lift most of the advantages, because you want to do it, of course, always in harmony with the network.
And look, that was, again, the other concern, which was, okay, I've got GDPR, I've got certain things if I'm in the European, and where's my data going to reside, right? And then getting through that, again, it's just one less friction point for the customer so that they can start getting true value out of what they're looking to do. There's going to be a million different sessions on AI. Are you going to be leading any additional ones over the next couple of days?
Yeah, so I'm actually, right after this, I will be on stage at the partner advisory meeting, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And also, I've built actually my together with my team, I have to say, I've built my own models and also some simulation tools and that I use personally, or some small agents that do RFP comparison, just to also explain in a much easier fashion, because I'm not super technical, even though I at one point did informatics at university, but I was never good at coding, right? But now I can at least translate it also to my teams in sales or pre-sales that are not as technical, so that we also come across not talking just about the technicalities of things, but also the value that we can lift. So for example, I had the personal issue in my own business that I had to approve always these big POs, right? They came from Japan, from our Japan business, that they wanted some external workforce or whatever. And then, I couldn't do anything but approve and say, I hope this is aligned with our CFO, whatever. Right? So with Victor, so copy him. And then, but now what my team together with me have built, and that is the beauty, right? Because I've witnessed this firsthand. It's like, the coding as such is fast, but it's then the back and forth. Like, do you like it? What do you want to change? Okay, I want this, I want that. So he built me basically, or the team built me a PO simulation tool where the PO comes in and it already says, okay, from a cash position, you can approve this. Or, from a budget position, you can approve this. But then you click on the PO and then you find your financial data that comes with it. And it says, okay, you are under your defined threshold for cash for 63 days, whatever. And then the agent goes further and says, yeah, but you could split the PO into 3 different POs, or you could ask for net 45 instead of net 30, or you could actually go into Taulia and leverage an external credit line. But to get to that point, took actually longer than the build as such, because it was a constant back and forth. But now this is super powerful if you can see what really the value is. And that makes me much more, or puts me in a position to make a decision that otherwise would have at least needed 5 telephone calls. And then with the time zone changes, most probably at least 3 days, because you're then calling somebody who's not available anymore because he's in Germany, I'm in the US, and so it's super powerful. And then whenever we go in RFPs right now, then in the RFPs and 100%, everybody wants, like, this needs to be AI and this needs to be AI, and you can't even participate if you don't have this. And so we build, for example, these RFP comparison agents, right, that go into pricing agent, TNC agent. So all not production ready. This is what Manoj and Fang are building and what they are announcing tomorrow, that it is production ready. But I think it is so important that, and I can only recommend to everybody to acquaint yourself into it, see what's possible, in order to be able to then also, define timelines and all of that. Because, of course you can say, build this next week, but you still need to test this. You still need to make sure that it runs the result all the time. So I'm super excited about it. I hope you can feel that. And I think this is what my father always said. He worked 47 years for IBM. He always said, Peter, this is the beauty of working for a big tech company. You don't need to change the company to see other parts of the business, because it's big enough. You can do actually every job from left to right. But 2, in IT and in technology, it changes typically at least every 7-8 years. And so you are always excited. So I think, many people are looking at this as a threat. I'm like, okay, this is another 7-8 year opportunity. Totally. It's awesome.
This is the next cycle, right? It's funny you say that, because we've been doing a bunch of experimentation in a couple ways. So building, obviously, and allowing our team, through agents, right, that we can build, and Joule and, Microsoft, et cetera, cloud agents as well. Okay, you have an idea on how you can make your job more efficient. Play with these tools, right? Bring them up to the committee, right? And if they're ubiquitous and they can be kind of broader, or maybe they're for a certain function, let's employ them. And then let them iterate on it. And people are having fun doing it. Right. But what they're finding is the time saving, to your point, like, okay, 5 calls. We do the same thing, where it's like, okay, it's not just about, can we deliver to a customer faster, or can we do certain things efficiently? It's, how do I buy time for myself or my team? Can the organization find, time to do things differently? And in some cases, it could be, hey, I freed up 2 hours of my day. I can actually now go pick up my kids from school, or I could go do this or that. There's a quality of life improvement that goes along with it. So, we have the other side of that too, where we're starting to build capabilities for customers. So you guys are encouraging your partners to build, right? What's the strategy around that? And maybe some of your excitement around, what the partner ecosystem can provide to the customers, particularly across F&S.
Yeah. I think, when you look at it, why have certain technologies failed with some companies. I think one example sticks out to me, which I think Satya Nadella also gave multiple interviews about.
Yeah.
They had most probably the best phone with the Nokia phone back then, best technology, but their app store was empty.
Yeah.
So nobody actually adopted it, and it was unusable, whereas the iPhone basically excelled because of the app store. So
Yes.
the concept is real, that if you have your partners build on top of your technology, provide as many additions and extensions to the product, that you become relevant, stay relevant with your customers, because then it's exactly that point that I mentioned earlier. If it is something that is distinguishing you or differentiating you from the competition, then you should build it. And then it's most probably not SAP who should build it, because it's so bespoke that you better go to a partner like Nitor, because they know your industry, they know this, how to do it. And then you build it on top of the standard functionality that is provided. So I think I'm so excited about it, because if we can, I once learned this, I don't know who I actually learned this from, but if you have 3 extensions to your product, you are also much more sticky. Right?
Yes.
So I mean, it's
100%.
it's of course you're delivering more value to the customer, but you are also more sticky. And at the end of the day, I'm also responsible to keep the revenue for us. So that is also there's always the one on the other side. So I'm very excited that also then partners like you have picked it up and have already built here in the preparation for Sapphire. And again, to your point earlier, I can only recommend to everybody to try it out, because we had this discussion with most probably 35 CPOs over the last 2 weeks, and we were talking about what talent is needed for the future. And if you think about it, so also in finance,
That's a good topic, by the way.
it's a great topic. I mean, they have been talking about this. We actually cleared up the second day of the agenda to only talk about that, because for them the key question is, okay, how do you get your people to a point that they can actually adopt all of this, right, and work with it? Because the threat to the people is not for those who acquaint themselves with the technology, but the threat is to those that do not. Because hire somebody from Georgia Tech. I mean, we're both from Atlanta.
Yeah.
Hire one from Georgia Tech. Tell them,
Great
solve
school.
this.
I'm a bulldog. Again, props. Great
Solve this finance topic, right? Solve this tax issue. They will figure out in 5 minutes what the issue from a tax perspective is, because tax is all perfectly documented, right? And the AI can actually read documentation really well.
Yeah.
So it's, yes, the person might lack the subject matter expertise, but that person will try hard to build it quickly, iterate on it, and most probably gets to the answer quicker than the subject matter expert that has done it for 50 years. So the threat is really to those that do not acquaint themselves. If you are a great financial SME, let's say you have worked in tax and advisory forever, and you add on top this capability to do the right work and acquaint yourself and do prompts the right way, prompt engineering and all of that, then you are exceptional, right? But if you wait now, then you're most probably really going to get run out by the youngsters this coming.
Yeah, there's, you see some of the discussions where they're like, oh, there's not going to be jobs for, first level kids coming out of college. I'm like, you're completely wrong on that.
Totally.
Right? Like, my kids can run circles around more people that I know that are, quote, tech savvy than anything. And I think that ingenuity that they bring, the passion, and look, do you need a certain layer? I call it the discernment layer or the intelligence layer that says, ultimately, this is the right decision versus that. You do need that. But what the passion that they bring in building some of this stuff is fantastic. That's a great topic for all of those CPOs to talk about, because we think about that quite often, like, because we do advisory work as well. What is the ideal world look like in an organization for a CPO where you've got an agentic army, right? That's doing a lot of this work. What are those right roles for them? The answers aren't totally clear yet, but I think we're getting a better picture for it. But it's good to see that other people are really focused on that too.
Yeah, and one of the exciting outcomes is actually that you cannot stay in your field anymore. So just because you have always worked in procurement doesn't mean that in the future, you will be able to also understand what's the process before it actually comes to me as a sourcing manager, what's the process that I hand it off to, and how can I actually streamline that whole process? How can I make this cross-domain reasoning work? And so I think it's also this openness, really this mindset of being able to, learn something new, right? Get yourself acquainted into it. And again, I think, I'm not worried at all. I mean, my kids are 8 and 10. I'm sending them to the best possible school because I want them to learn the best communication abilities. I want them to learn to be able to be open to culture. So they're going to a school where there are 92 different nationalities represented. So because I think that is what later differentiates themselves, right? That they can go up on a stage and talk very openly and with full confidence.
Yes.
But I think also, if I look back, I mean, even I'm young, right? I would call myself most probably a digital native still, and so are you. But the point is, would we have seen Instagram coming? Would we have seen, coming that we can now drive Waymos? I mean, there's also there's going to be so many new businesses opened that we will most probably scratch our heads still and say like, oh boy.
Yeah, I saw there was 2 Waymos outside the hotel just a few minutes ago, and then that's great kind of feedback about could we have anticipated any of this? No. And then I tell my kids as well, like, think about your passion, see what you can build on that. That entrepreneurial side of that, I think is going to surprise everybody so much. What about the CPOs? So you talk to them, what do you think their role looks like going forward? Because to me, it's shifting, right? In many different ways to where it used to be kind of back office. I think they're way more front and center than they've ever been before as this conduit between the innovation cycle, right, and then the operational component of things. So any feedback from them on what they think is going to happen?
Definitely. And what we can see is they're positioning themselves already.
100%.
Right? So we have this cool new series with our customers, which is called the Go and See event, where we have a customer that invites other CPOs to their premises and then, talks about what they do, and also an opportunity for them to show what they have done as a chief procurement officer, but also what their company has done otherwise. So the first one was in Belgium last year with Vodafone. They have their procurement headquarters there. Then we were just 3 weeks ago in New York at IBM's offices with Laurie as their CPO. And so you can see that they are positioning themselves already as tech, of course, procurement, but then certainly a huge influence over the P&L, right? That they are the 100%. Ones that can enable business through the 360
through all the
relationships
R&D and everything else that they're investing in.
Also 360 relationships where they say, okay, we give our sales department, we work with them to show where are the suppliers that are also buyers and whatnot, and the other way around. So so they are positioning themselves that they are, of course, have always been the biggest influence to bottom line, but now that they can even become the top line influence, and that they are tech savvy. So all of them spoke about how they have used some of the headcount that they either got through approvals or through attrition, and built their own shadow IT, built their own shadow AI.
Interesting.
Because they said, like, we never get something, right? It's also, if you're today asking for to solve for a problem, the answer is, we can help you in 12 weeks, or, and then from there it will take us a half a year and a team of 10. But this is not how you can calculate going forward. In 12 weeks, this problem is already not existing anymore because somebody else had solved it. Right?
Yes.
So this is where they position themselves already massively, and you can see how they are already thinking about, how do they move people around? How do they position themselves with the CEO, not so much anymore with the CFO?
Right.
It's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I think that role, to me, I first started seeing it during COVID. There was this evolution, and then certainly in the last 2 years, a recasting of that role, to your point, where you're closer to the top line component of that. You're embedded more and more with the sales organizations as well, as things become even more and more competitive. And I think certainly AI is going to be a facilitator of that to a large degree, to where sales guys out in the field, he's in a competitive deal. Their product is too expensive. Is there another place to go source elements of it, or to do X, Y, and Z, either from distribution or shipping or whatever? Those things are going to become very possible for on the fly, or it could be in the future, not even the sales guy, it could be the agent out there communicating with the seller agent, right? Or whoever, the buyer and the seller. So it's going to evolve in ways that we can't predict yet. Honestly.
Yeah. Also, if you think about it, right, what's possible today, that you can actually analyze a let's say, a component like a little engine that sits somewhere in a big machine. And you can analyze it through an agent and say, okay, how much of those components are which commodities? How are the commodity prices actually going to increase? And then you can make recommendations to the business and say, hey, we buy a few more of those because actually the price for gold is currently skyrocketing, platinum as well. So, and this is just one example, but where you can also become the strategic advisor that then advises the business, because you have all this data either through your own data, through benchmarks, or the combination of all of that.
Yeah. Well, look, I think it's an exciting time.
Oh, yeah.
Every day I get a text from somebody. It feels like it's like, what a wild time, right, to be alive, right? When all this, and I think Sapphire is a great example of that, because I think, all the different innovations and the things that we're going to learn and see, and the conversations that people are having, what was not possible before now seems fairly possible to go do.
And I think you mentioned something earlier that I want to also call out, right? Because I feel this all the time. So you mentioned earlier, we can do it with Joule, or you can do it with Copilot or whatever from Microsoft. And so some of my customers, when they were presenting, they're like, hey, can I say that we did that actually with Copilot and not with SAP products? And I said, like, of course you can, because there's a space for actually a lot of them, because they work together. I mean, you can then build it back into an email. You can build it back into a calendar, and whatever you can think of, you use them. And SAP also works on the HA agent-to-agent protocol that was created by Google, right? So that we have this standard also that our agents will be able to talk to the other agents too, and make sense and reasoning. So that's important, so that we say there's nothing wrong with using other agents as well, right? And I think we are, as I said, in this experimentation phase where they have to try out the others to also then say, okay, this one's better over the other or whatever, or they work best together. And then the other part is also, I think we need to work also between the partners in a much deeper way, like we have in the past, right? So for example, Nitor, you are really well known for your cloud ERP expertise and the procurement expertise. But you might not have maybe the tax advisory expertise, and I'm making this up, right? It might not be true. But then work with another partner there that has this expertise to bring the best of all worlds together. I think this is now where, if you wait until you have built out your tax advisory capabilities, I mean, then, that problem is also gone, right?
You are singing from the hymnal, as we say here in the South. My personal belief, and we've kind of pioneered this concept, is the whole idea behind together is better.
Yeah.
Right, is that no one firm is great at everything, just like one software company is not great at everything. And I think the world that we're emerging into is about collaboration. Yeah. And so we do that on our own. We have our own partner hub and our own partner ecosystem, particularly on the finance side. Where we'll work with the best of the best, deep expertise boutiques that are create a cash management or treasury or some other component of that. And there's an appetite, I think, from the customers out there. Yes, you've got your large GSSPs, and many of them are excellent. But we consider ourselves more of of a really kind of just sharp edge of the spear. Like, we want to be the best, and we want to have the best people, and then we'll associate with different components of that as well. Same thing applies to software. And if I look at software at that layer, look, any of the ISVs out there, SAP included, you build horizontally because you have a wide customer base. You made a point earlier about verticalization, industry specificity, getting good at that. That's where things are going. Yeah. We're doing some of that on our end as well. More to come on that. But, and I think the agent-to-agent component of that, if it resides in, and the entry point of that, and then the underlying infrastructure behind it, which is SAP with all the controls, you marry those things together, and there's room for everybody. Yeah. Right, in those environments. And so that's going to be an exciting thing for customers.
Agreed.
Yeah. Oh. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Off to the rest of Sapphire, for the next couple of days. I wish you success, which you will always have. And again, I'm very grateful for your time today. Thanks for your partnership.
Thank you so much,
We
Jim.
appreciate it.
This is great.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, buddy.